Hi, this is Ellen Bench, and I welcome you to this live recorded class dealing with homeopathic remedies, applying them to farm and ranch and pet issues. Homeopathic remedies are not a replacement for veterinary services. I don't profess to be a veterinarian, nor to replace services that veterinarians provide. What we're going to do with homeopathic remedies is improve the health and vitality of your livestock, give you options instead of using toxic chemicals or drugs with side effects, and toxic vaccines. We have alternative immunizations which are highly effective, treatments for sick or injured animals, and then the ultimate goal, which is to reduce your costs for both labor and medicating by having healthier stock. The homeopathic remedies are suggestions for you. I have made some combinations in my 25 years of homeopathic experience. The remedies recommended are with the beginning in a starter kit so that you get these concepts and make your livestock healthier. From that point forward, you should be able to use the remedies to crisis manage in a simple and very effective manner. We've included some individual experiences and references in your class materials, which should accompany this DVD. And I encourage you to call and schedule independent consultations for any services that you may need that are specific to your operation or your organization. I look forward to answering any questions, meeting your needs, and providing high quality products that improve the health, vitality, and lower your overall costs.
We have cow-calf, I do some chickens, and then of course we have those cats and dog and
great
ducks, you know. The cow-calf I think has done very well. I probably only use this a little more than a year.
Yes.
But like out of 120 as a herd, we had probably one pink eye. And I'm thinking maybe it's one that we had bought and she slipped through before I was able to get her taken care of properly. The chickens.
Significant back to the pink eye is that the one contaminated animal didn't give it to the rest of your herd.
Right, that's the only one that we had.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even if the cow slipped through, the other cattle were protected?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that's pretty slick, do you think?
Yeah, and I do treat our salt or mineral in the, out in the pasture during the summer.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I just, besides the water.
Treat meaning you're putting the remedy on the mineral?
Yes.
So you're leaving it for them free choice to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. And then, I guess, with the chickens, we've just had, like Sue had mentioned, the production is really, really good in the winter. You don't notice so much in the summer, but also big, nice big eggs. They're just gorgeous and nice dark yellow.
The other question I have about chickens, for those of you who are using ProThrive for chickens, is how about parasites? Birds are notoriously buggy. So are your chickens staying healthy?
They look good. They don't,
okay.
Their feathers look good. So, they don't look all ratty and stuff. I'd say
they're good.
The other thing is we brought in some new layers.
Mm-hmm.
They were already laying last fall. And they had no feathers on their backs.
Mm-hmm.
But after they were at our place for a while, their feathers came back in.
Good.
So that was good.
We've been using this for about 4 years in homeopathics in the cattle herd. The first time we used it, we did kind of an experiment where we had a group that did not get any of the remedies and the other group did. And there was definitely a reduction of the fly population in the ones where we used the Pro Vitality versus a group that hadn't received anything. We've also noticed improved hair coat, especially in the spring after they're shedding, where they would slick up and look a lot better using the homeopathics, we were having a little trouble with some of the cows having a sway looking back, and that's improved. And about 2 years ago, our calves, after we weaned them, they were in a dry lot, and they developed some kind of fungus growth around their face and eyes and head and neck. And we used Remedi there, and that cleared up. And haven't had that repeat. We've got basically a better overall health with the cattle since we've been using the homeopathics. We don't use a needle anymore, so we don't have to do any unnecessary vaccinations that way.
We have cow-calf operation and our hormone wake-up.
And you have buffalo?
Yes.
You're doing cattle too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually we had an increased buffalo crop this year too, which was awesome. We had more calves this year. And then we also, not this year's calf crop is on the cattle end is way higher as well.
Okay, and what do you attribute that to?
The hormonal wake-up.
Okay.
I'm positive that's what it is. But it, you know, it's funny because we've used this, I think it was the 3rd year we used it. And this is the 1st year we've really seen the results that we've gotten. And I don't know why that would be.
Okay.
But it
both
is.
cattle and buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is all, the other thing that I thought was really weird about the calving this year, actually it was last year, and maybe this was because of the hormonal wake-up too, I don't know. We always have more bull calves than heifers, and this year it flip-flopped dramatically.
Great.
So we had way more females than males. Like I think last year our crop was, I think, 18 buffalo bull calves. No, 9 buffalo bull calves and 18 heifers. That's very unusual. Very, very, very unusual. Because in buffalo, it's almost always a half and half, or slightly more males.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And last year is also the 1st year we've had more heifer calves than bull calves.
And the other chances that you had to use products were for your poultry also?
Uh-huh, yes.
And what's the experience with poultry?
Better laying. Chickens are happier. They go out and do more stuff. They're more likely to leave the hen house and travel out further looking for whatever they're looking for to eat. Mm-hmm.
So they seem more spry, more energetic, more enthusiastic,
yeah.
And better egg production.
Much better egg production.
Okay, what's that mean, better egg production?
I'd say that egg production probably doubles.
All right. All right. Now,
especially through the winter months. In the summertime, you don't notice it as much, but in the winter months, I really notice it.
How often are you using that Remedi? Using Pro Vitality?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I put it in their water all the time.
We have a cow-calf operation, sheep, goats, chickens. The products that we've used probably the last 3 years have just been totally awesome about turning our herd health around. I use Pro Vitality, the weaning. When we do the weaning, we need to do the weaning combo. The pink eye has just really helped tremendously this last couple of years in the upper respiratory. So as far as I'm concerned, any product or anything that comes up in our herd, I find a homeopathic remedy from Ellen, and it will take care of it.
And we don't have foot rat anymore either.
No, we don't.
No
either.
foot rat at all.
No.
And we used to always treat several animals every summer, and we never have foot rat now.
Right.
Same here.
Outstanding.
Yeah,
So
same
no
here.
foot rot.
No foot rot. No. Another positive thing, since using the homeopathic, we do no vaccinations at all for the whole herd. By using these kind of products, people can change their whole herd by not doing that vaccination program.
What is the change for your herd?
Just like adding these products whenever stress comes involved, like weaning, or like the other day the weather was so hot that was extremely upsetting to them. So a little bit of, even though they weren't being weaned, they'd already been weaning, by putting some of that in the water, I think it helped with the stress with that temperature. So by just implementing these kind of products, you can get away from the other. And by selling beef that we promote as being healthy, I can promote it a lot easier by using homeopathic products. and, everything non-GMO.
And how about the public interest in the fact that you have animals that are not medicated?
A lot of them are still like, oh yeah, well, if they go to my place, I'll want to, medicate them anyway. And so the people I sell them to, I tell them my protocol. I give them examples and samples to keep them doing this way. So I think gradually people will come around as people are interested in more, are more health conscious in what kind of animals and what kind of meat they're eating.
Yes.
But it's a process.
Great.
I've seen the Pro Thrive and the alfalfa boost, hold down the nitrates in the stomach, for the cattle. The immunizer, I've been 3 years without any vaccines in my calves and my cows. The pink eye, it helps. I've seen that work too. Well, the immunizer is, I don't know how to say it. I have to vaccinate my calves to be able to sell them, because even in the all-natural world, the feedlots want vaccinated calves. And every time, and I even cut the dosage in half this year, and every time I do that, it makes them calves sick.
Wow.
After, I've had them cleaned up, and in order, to be truthful, when they go to the sale barn, last year I did the same thing, but I only sold my steers, and it made them sick too. I sold a bunch of bred heifers this fall that had never seen a needle for vaccine. And the kid that bought them out of eastern Iowa, he said that were probably the healthiest looking animals he'd ever seen. I mean, as far as pneumonia problems, foot rot problems, and what I see is, I work the mineral side too, so they both work hand in hand. I won't go away from it.
Okay, well, I have a horse that I show, and American Quarter Horse shows. We do horsemanship and Western riding, and I ride him regularly, weekly, several times a week, 3, 4, 5 times a week. And I've owned him for 3 years, and he started to trip last year, and he tripped bad enough that the crowd just went, oh, they thought we were going to fall. But so then in the winter, when I was kind of done showing, I took him to our veterinarian, and he treated him for EPM, and he was better for a while. But then towards the end of the summer, this last summer, he started to trip again, and he actually tripped bad enough the one day it was like, mentally, I kept riding him thinking, well, he's got 3 other legs, it'd be trips. But then finally he tripped bad enough. I was just nervous riding him. It wasn't fun to ride him, and I thought, I have to do something to try to help him. And when I was trying to decide whether just to go back to the vet again, or I knew I've had good results with homeopathy in a lot of other ways, I called and I got some remedies recommended to try, and so I gave him the remedies, and I really watched him really close, and within the first day or two, I could just see a brighter look in his eyes. It was like he felt better. And so then I gave him a full week after I treated him with the remedies. I think I treated him 3 days in a row, and then I treated him once a week for 4 weeks. And after the end of the first week, I rode him, and he just really didn't trip. And he may, on a really rare occasion, trip, but then horses kind of do that anyway. And I'm just thrilled. And I feel like if I have trouble again, I have a place to go to get help for him.
My father-in-law raises butcher chickens to sell, and he was buying anywhere from 100 to 200 at a time, and they were dying at a rate of 80 to 90% within the first week of getting them. Normally, you only lose about maybe 10%. So I used the cell salts to help the chickens, absorb the water and the electrolytes get back into them and absorb their feed. When I first treated the water, there were several chickens, probably 20 to 25, that were already looking pretty lethargic and on their last leg. And I treated them directly with the cell salts. The next morning, he had only lost 3 out of 100. So he was pretty ecstatic. And by the end of the week, he hadn't lost any more. So it was just the 3. So when he went and got another 100, we treated the water right away, and he never lost a chicken after that. So the cell salts work. It's phenomenal, and he is now a believer and will do nothing. Will always do the cell salts from now on whenever he buys the chickens. So I have been very impressed, as he has, which says a lot, because he's an old rancher that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So it's changed his outlook on homeopathy and shown me what just cell salts alone can do, let alone the remedies. Now, when there's something wrong with any of his animals, he doesn't necessarily go directly to, the modern or, Western vet medicine. He'll actually come and ask me if I have anything for, say, bloating or overeating or, foot rot. I just helped him clean up a case of foot rot here not too long ago. And it was like over 150 calves that had signs of foot rot. And we were able to heal all of them but one. So the remedies work. Oh. That was with cell salts and the foot rot remedies that Ellen has, combo remedy. It's been a lot of fun. I love animals because they're it's either going to work or it's not. There's no mind, games, if you will. That thinking that, I'll get better because I'm taking this now. They don't have that capacity, so it's either A, going to work, or B, not. So it's a true testament of homeopathy, because it'll either work or it won't. So, and when it works, it's huge. A lot of people stand back and go, wow. So, yeah, I've had really great luck with the animals, and I love treating them because of that. Number one, because it opens everyone's eyes, but number two, we're healing animals without hurting them or making their life more miserable than it needs to be.
We have cows and cow-calf. We have some pork, we have chickens, and we've used the remedies a lot for our cats and dogs too around the house. But I guess the biggest thing for our cattle, we have cut down the number of cattle we used to have, mainly cow-calf, and sell pairs and raise fat cattle. But what we've done recently is we've gone now to direct sales for the meat for everything. Our story has been kind of interesting, because I would say probably 20 years ago we were having major disease problems, and we tried to find help with usually the veterinaries didn't have any answer, so we tried to find people that would help us with mineral supplements. That's all we knew what to do. We did try a little homeopathy at that time, but it was long distance, and we didn't have it wasn't very extensive, so we didn't have much experience really. But with the minerals, they finally just told us, we can't help you. You're doomed. You don't know how we're going to solve these problems. So we started to overcome it a little bit with some mineral supplements. We still had plenty of problems. And when Ellen came 6 years ago, and we started using the remedies, we virtually, from that time till now, we have almost no vet bill at all.
Yeah, this is Howard Scow. I own North American Foods in Montana. I've owned that business for 38 years, and we've looked at a lot of animals. I see a lot of livers and a lot of bad lungs in animals and stuff. With Ellen's animals, I just finished butchering them. All the livers on those lambs were good and clean livers. The lungs had no parasites. They looked very nice. It was she's done a very good job of keeping those things free of parasites. I butchered a beef for her about a month ago, and the beef was really good and clean too. The liver was good on it. We're going to butcher another one here in just a minute, and I'm looking at that beef as we're speaking. It's a very good beef. Looks very healthy, real nice.
So, my name is Ellen Bench, and I am a classically trained homeopath. I've done homeopathy for the last 26, 27 years. Lauren turns 26 this year. So I should say 27? Oh. So that means that I've been doing homeopathy about 30 years now. I used homeopathic remedies for female problems and infertility. So I think having children with a homeopathic remedy is what I would consider to be truly life-changing, and I like to share. And the reason that I teach is to empower other people to have solutions for problems as well. So my story pertaining to animals, which is the subject of this farm and ranch class, it takes off from that first experience that I had with a homeopath, and being able to resolve what I would consider to be a very chronic problem for which only surgery and drug solutions were offered to me. So when my girls were prior to school age, we moved to Montana. I bought 10 acres and wanted to be able to improve the quality of food that I was eating. One of the main problems with seeing an infertility specialist at the time was the question asked of me was, how much meat do you eat? And I said, I eat a lot of chicken. She said, you'll never ovulate, it's so full of estrogen. So the supplementation that was being provided to our food in steroids and antibiotics and other pharmaceutical products was alarming to me. So what I did to try to solve that at the time was to begin to eat vegetarian. So I ate vegetarian through the first few years of my children's life, and decided that my goal was to live as clean as absolutely possible. So that provoked me to look into places that I consider to have or have available clean living conditions. So I bought 10 acres that was not previously farmed. There were no chemicals used on the property. The well was deep, so I had pure water. The air was as clean as I felt like I had availability to, and we landed here. So I started working the soil and tried to provide some fresh groceries, and then brought in a couple of sheep that I felt like I could handle the size of the animal. And we had rabbits and chickens and turkeys and other fowl as well, until we finally brought a couple of steers on the property. Now this journey is interesting, not having been raised with farm animals, is contacting the local vets and the feed stores in the area to find out exactly what the threats were, what they recommended for treatment as well as prevention through conventional immunization. When I gathered that information, I began to attempt the study and then the problem solving to do prevention, which is way easier, by the way, than doing treatment. If we can make the animals healthier and we not need to vaccinate or worm or treat for parasites or funguses and ringworm and et cetera, other infectious diseases, the easier it is. So that study ensued. I spent a number of years experimenting with my own animals to see if I couldn't, through their watering system, provide protection. So as of this date, I've never had a sick animal on my property, never had to medicate them, just like my children. So they've not been immunized, or have I had to use any type of conventional medication. Now I professionally have the animals butchered over the years to ensure that that wasn't a delusion on my part. That externally what I could see and in performance was also reflected on the inside. So my butcher has been in business for 50 years, and I've been able to produce animals with clean lungs, clean livers, and no enlarged lymph nodes, which is a really good validation that the animals are in fact healthy before I eat them, which is really an encouragement, I would say. So we've added obviously meat back into our diet now that I have a clean, unmedicated source. So in my travels, as I've been teaching homeopathy and working with families in the Midwest, most of the Midwest is farming country. So in the at the request, I should say, of the farmers, or if you could make my family healthy or cure or solve for chronic disease, what can you do for our animals? So I said, gee, that's really funny, but I pretty much solved most of those problems myself. I have the my personal experience, and I'd be happy to share it with you. So through the next 5 years, we created some controlled environments and attempted to medicate control groups for parasite prevention, for wasting disease, for every possible problem that you can think of, from pink eye to foot rot, to, like I said, wasting, not shutting off, all kinds of parasitic problems, flies, lice, worms, etc. And I want to tell you how proud I am that we were able to actually accomplish some really phenomenal results. So the issue really turned out to be how to get homeopathic remedies to the animals, because the pasture conditions were different. There were windmills filling big containers, there was open watering, and I had successfully used a water container, whether that be 50 gallons or 500 gallons in the form of a stock tank, or even automatic waters to dispense these homeopathic remedies to my animals. So this actually created some brainstorming and some problem solving, which now has been, like I said, effectively implemented. And now I have the formulas available for other farms and ranches, dealerships that will be selling homeopathic remedies in the Midwest and commonly available. We also have them available in our offices in what I would consider to be commercial quantities to be able to dispense for large herds, small herds, and individual food producers that might be beginning to embrace sustainable ag that's becoming so popular in the last few years. The other issue is that what is homeopathy and how do we use it, and what does it mean exactly when we've been using mineral supplementation, trying not to medicate for the grass-fed movement, and to get organically or natural qualified beef, dairy, and other meat products. So I'm here tonight to be able to give you that information and give you a foundation in what homeopathy is, so that you'll understand how to use it or to problem solve for yourself with the products that will be made available to you. What I'd like to know is what animals that you are concerned about, what specific problems you may have had, what you've been trying in your own pasture conditions, and where your befuddlements are, so that I can give you some good advice as well as make it worth the trip you made over here tonight. So Dave, how about if you tell me a little bit about your operation?
We're a cow-calf operation, but pretty small. We've got 50 pairs now. We haven't had a lot of problems. Mostly the animals are healthy. I told you on the phone that I've been trying to solve a puzzle with our mineral consumption for years. Our cows always overconsume mineral, no matter what packages we've tried. It may be related to our water, because we have a lot of mineral in the water, which may be tying up some of the minerals that they require. We've had some foot rot, we've had some pink eye, wanted to provide the best that we could for our animals and support their natural immune system any way possible. And just didn't know that there was a lot of alternative to antibiotics. Personally, I'm not that anxious about the use of antibiotics. We've depended on them for years. But now I'm starting to understand that there's a lot of concern with the use of antibiotics. You know, we want to offer animals that are raised on grass as much as possible because I think that's how they're designed and how they do best.
You bet.
So if there's a way that we can participate in that and try some alternative ways to support their health and well-being, well, that's why I called you on the phone. Really, I thought I just wanted enough information to be able to make a decision, and you offered all that you could, and we kind of got to a place where you said, well, you know, if you get the cattle starter kit, that's all you need to get started. I just realized I wasn't going to be able to find out what this was all about without trying.
Great. Glad to have you. You won't, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. So we're going to give you lots of answers tonight, and we're really glad you came.
Thanks.
All right. So tell me about what's going on in Roundup. What are you doing?
Well, actually, I'm a veterinarian and veterinary acupuncturist.
All right.
And we also raise all-natural grass-fed cattle, and we do sell our own meat. We've been working on the cattle program for 12 or 13 years now, and I just want to, and I also have a grass-fed milk cow. We don't feed any grain to any of our cattle at all. We have them on a good mineral program, and we have very little illness
Great.
in our cattle. But I just wanted to learn better ways of treating some of these animals and
All right.
some of our own.
Really tickled you came. Any challenges at all that you have to resort to an antibiotic?
Well, I really have not studied homeopathy at all, so this is new to me, and it's
Sure.
something I just wanted to look into. And I tend to be a minimalist when it comes to using antibiotics
Yes?
anyway, so I'm more into good nutrition and
Good.
keeping the herd healthy.
Great. Prevention's a lot easier.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Thanks for coming. Hi there.
Hi. My husband and I live in Medina, and we're starting a self-sustaining farm with a small flock of sheep, Jacobs. And they've never had any antibiotics or vaccinations. They've completely been raised organic, and I just want to keep it that way.
Great.
So far, it's been 2 years, and they've all been healthy and no problems, lambed well. And so I just wanted to learn more about just keeping them healthy.
Great. Any challenges that you've encountered so far?
Insects, ticks, like more,
Sure.
but nothing, just trying to keep them there. And
All right. Ladies in the back, you have any questions for me? No, you okay? Okay. So, let me tell you a little bit about homeopathy and where it fits and what we're going to do with it. So, homeopathic remedies have been around for about 220 years. They've been used for disease prevention from the very first remedy that was used to treat and by accident prevented malaria. So malaria is a insect or mosquito carried infection, and it was of great concern with very little options for treatment. 220 years ago, no antibiotics available. The common treatment for malaria was quinine. So quinine was a natural substance. It actually comes from chinchonia bark, from the quinine extracted from the chinchonia bark. So when the substance was taken, which is what Samuel Hahnemann did as a physician, a chemist, and a educated man of his day, late 1700s, was studying the concepts of like to cure like and using minimal doses to solve problems. And he actually took the quinine himself. And in taking the quinine, he was able to produce malaria-like symptoms. They lasted for a short period of time. When he repeated the experiment, he again got sick as if he had malaria. So he, I'm sure, arm twisted his colleagues as well as his family members to try this experiment to replicate the results that he had achieved. And again, when they took quinine without having previous malarial symptoms, they got sick as if malaria for a short period of time. So the problem with this experimentation process is that most of the meds of the day were poisons. So they used mercury and arsenic and turpentine, and it's not something, silver nitrate, not something that they wanted to take to see what symptoms they could produce. They were aware of the side effects, medicine of that time, and it'd be really difficult to get your family members morally and willingly to be taking poisonous substances. So what Hahnemann did that was unique, that makes homeopathy unique from naturopathy, or what we would consider to be nutrition, where we're taking a physical dose of a substance like a mineral, like the alfalfa or anything else that you might supplement the herd with, or the grass itself, is a physical dose that you have to consume and gets assimilated, hopefully, in that physical process. So uniquely, by making the remedies or these physical substances that they had as medicines into ultra dilutions, it changed the way they are used by the system, animal and human alike. So what happened to make a homeopathic remedy from a physical substance was the series of dilutions, which sets homeopathy, like I said, apart from what we call naturopathy, or what we would use as conventional substances that you have to swallow and then digest. So if we take a substance like we can take the substance arsenic, which is an element, grind it up into a form that makes it soluble, we can, once it's in a liquid form, refer to this as mother tincture or pharmaceutical zero. In this state, arsenic is poisonous. So to be able to experiment or to see what was medicinal potentially about the substance arsenic, what Hahnemann did was begin taking it through a series of dilutions. So when we make a remedy, we use sterile vials that have 100 drops of water in them, and we move 1 drop of arsenic to that 100. And then we go through a process called succussion. It's shaken, and actually imprinting, if we might call it that, the molecules of water. Now, once that first dilution is shaken or succussed, we're going to move 1 drop into the second 100 drops of water, and it becomes 1/100 to the second power in dilution. So we're going to move now 2 into 3, 3 into 4, etc. When we move 4 into 5 and 5 into 6, we refer to that potency as homeopathic 6C. It means not cc's in a form of measurement like we do in medicine, but how many times is this substance diluted. So when we get arsenicum or arsenic in 6C potency, it's actually been diluted 1/100 to the 6th power, which gives us 1 part with 12 zeros, which it converts it to 1 part per trillion. Now at this point, 1 part per trillion makes the arsenic non-toxic. We can now test this substance and see what in fact may be medicinal about it in a homeopathic experiment. These experiments are called provings, where we're actually going to gather what, when tested, does this substance produce for symptoms. So in this particular case, arsenic produced in the control group that it was given to the feeling of being poisoned. Antsy, stressful situation of feeling like they didn't trust the person who gave them the substance, like they may get sick and didn't want to be left alone, wanted to be taken care of or have their needs addressed. Now, it also produced burning pain. So they had burning, let's say, in their sinuses or in their discharges, including could be urinary tract infection burning if that was a vulnerability for one person. Another could have burning in their chest, another one burning on the skin. But arsenic as a substance in ultra dilution produced a very short-term reaction in people that was documentable in the sensation of burning. So what we do when we gather this information is then look for what it could be applied to in pathology. So what is it that we can use arsenicum for? Is we can use it for common poisonings. Poisonings from poisonous plants as an example. If we could also use it for substances like your dog getting into antifreeze. We can also use it for poisoning in things like chemotherapy or in wormer that we give to horses or other animals. It actually has a great facilitating effect to actually get rid of the symptoms of poisoning, both mentally and physically. The anxiety, the burning pain, or the restlessness that's produced by the condition of actually being sickened by the substance that we consume. So arsenicum, like other homeopathic remedies or substances taken from the earth at that time, 220 years ago, were documented as to the provings and their results. What's medicinal about this substance? They did that in diluted substances from anything that they could gather. The elements that we have today, 103 on the periodic table, 220 years ago consisted of about 6 to 8 different elements. They included things like sulfur and calcium, as well as gold and silver nitrate that were available. All the substances, including plants, began to be reduced into these ultra-diluted natural substances and used as medicines, just like the quinine was for malaria. If quinine was able to treat malaria, could it also be used as prevention or to eliminate the symptoms in somebody that was actually ill? And what happened was the results were fantastic. People began to seek out homeopathic treatment all over Europe, looking for relief from not only infectious diseases, but chronic diseases as well. So as this documentation for each substance was produced, they began to share that information, obviously, amongst other medical doctors of the day. Now, because the diseases of the day were commonly plagues and epidemics, we might call them today, there were huge groups of people affected, huge groups of animals affected with these disease issues. So homeopathy was made available to as many people as possible through this exchange of information. Now what happened is that the first people who actually traveled to talk to people like Hahnemann and his colleagues included people with money, like the royal family in England. So the royal family today still has the homeopath as their primary care provider. The Queen Mother has never been medicated that I know of, and she has a personal homeopathic physician. These remedies 200 years ago in use by these royals, if we call them, or people that were influential, took homeopathy all over the world, because at that particular time, into the 1700s, into the early 1800s, what was happening politically was we were occupying countries, or they were occupying countries, the English, the French, the Spanish, and they took homeopathic remedies all over the world. So homeopathy went to India, it went to the United States, it went to Africa. Homeopathy is used all over the world still today. When homeopathy came to the United States, the very first medical college, which still stands today in Philadelphia, was homeopathic. Homeopathy was part of the medical training in all of the major colleges in the East Coast, all the way through as far west at that time as Chicago. Into the 1900s, came west even further, but homeopathy was available to people and animals from the very get-go, or the beginnings of our country. Now, its homeopathic availability in the United States was available at the rate of about 50%. You could go to a medical doctor trained in homeopathic pharmacy, or in what would be considered common or traditional medical substances. That was possible. You could go to a homeopathic veterinarian, a homeopathic gynecologist, a homeopathic dentist, all the way up until the late 1940s into the 1960s, when homeopathy nearly disappeared in this country. So I'll talk to you a little bit about what happened to homeopathy, but all over the world it continued to be in common use. So the way a homeopathic remedy works, and we commonly say this when we teach homeopathy or discuss it, is homeopathy is unique from using physical substances, because the more we dilute a remedy, the better it works. So if we dilute a remedy out to 30 C potency versus 6 C potency, we're diluting the remedy 1 to 100 to the 30th power, which means that's 1 over 100 with 60 zeros. It becomes what's known as in science as a nanodose. Nano meaning small and nearly unmeasurable by the tools, especially of that day. And also considered to be extremely powerful. So why or how do these ultra diluted natural substances work, and how and why are they popular worldwide? What happens is that the way a homeopathic remedy works is it has an affinity for what Hahnemann called in his day the vital force. Now in Hahnemann's day there were no, this is into the 1700s, there were no microscopes. There was no talk about genetic predisposition or DNA. They really believed that disease was a result of curses, something you did wrong, that you were being punished for. It was a really common perception. We might refer to it today as karma, something you did to deserve getting sick. But there were no microscopes, there were no tools that we have today, there were no MRIs or CAT scans or blood tests. What Hahnemann did was he laid out where he thought that the origin of disease was. So he said that there is a genetic predisposition. He even named them, gave them categories that represented disease that are still accurate and we use today. And also, this information is also found in our Merck manuals as well, both for people and animals. That this was not only true for his day, but is true today. That we can name and actually see evidence of this genetic predisposition. He also said that diet and environment were what we call maintaining causes of disease. So what was happening is that even though you ate good, or had what you would consider to be no stress, that you could still have a disease predisposition or an influence. So the influences of disease that could be considered environmental could be whether there was mold in the hay, or whether there was mold at the time in a basement, whether they told people to change their disease influence of environment, that they should do things like move to Arizona if you had asthma, that you'd be less irritated, or that you should move upstairs instead of in that damp basement. But ultimately, the influence of disease was considered to be your environment. The other one was diet, obviously. If we ate good, provided things like you're doing, good quality hay, or grass, plenty of clean water, as well as things like your mineral supplementation, then we should be able to minimize disease. The opposite would be if it's dirty. So if there was ick in your hay was dirty, let's say that it had the ergotrate of rye, which would cause abortion, that particular mold that you find on the grain could cause respiratory infections, it could cause arthritic conditions, it could also cause miscarriage or abortion, or infertility. So these influences of our food, positive or negative, as well as our environment, were acknowledged to be influential on the disease. Then what happened is that we could have symptoms that manifested as a state of imbalance or negative influences. Now what happened at that particular point is if you had, let's say, a fever or a skin condition, when a drug was applied, what it would do is temporarily relieve the symptoms, but the next time that the animal or the human got sick, it would be sick in a slightly different way and slightly worse than it was before, if it didn't return in its first form, forcing us to medicate again. This process of covering up a problem, deepening the pathology, and coming up with a worse condition is known as suppression. And it's the main reason that we as homeopaths balk about using medicine, is that it could give you temporary or crisis management value, but long-term use actually creates a cover-up which deepens the diseases. So suppression is the big liberation that we have when we teach people how to use homeopathic remedies, is not to cover up a problem, but actually solve it. So when we use a remedy, we're actually going to stop this process of suppression and solve it at the symptom level. It doesn't matter what the name of the disease is, whether it's pneumonia or whether it's pink eye, but it doesn't provoke it to become a new form of disease, maintaining a healthier system. So the goal is to not create suppression. The politics of not creating suppression, or the acknowledgement that using an antibiotic or things like mercury and silver nitrate, other forms of treatment of the day, was that if you acknowledged that there were in fact side effects or effects of medicine, was very unpopular, because a physician takes an oath not to do harm. So this was very controversial, or what we might say today is referred to as politically incorrect, because it's going to offend somebody if we imply that they're giving people a substance that produces a side effect. That we create suppressions when we treat disease, it invokes people to ask questions. What else is available and what else can I do? So teaching people how to solve a problem at this level is not only an empowerment in speedy healing, but also in prevention of deeper, more chronic diseases. Now, what happened is that what Hahnemann also said is, if we could use these ultra-diluted natural substances, how exactly do they work and how is the body receiving them? If we're not putting them in our belly like we might do the calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, or sodium, and now borax and other things that you're using to try to supplement your cattle, what if in fact they're not assimilating? What is happening if we cannot prevent disease at this level, diet and environment? We're taking into account that there's more going on here. That this environment could be inclusive of the mosquitoes or the wet conditions that the animals are living in. Could minimize or weaken what? The immune system. What is called, or was called by Hahnemann, vital force. So how we look at this vital force is that acknowledging that it exists, that we have in the animal kingdom this vitality, this thing we can measure. How vital, or what's our state of disease or vulnerability, is referred to as vital force. It's the action at which we are alive, actually. It gets divided into two parts, in that we have this vitality we can measure and disease which we can also measure. We have 100% vitality available to us, and it gets split. When we drop from our vitality down from 100% to 90, it's because we might have been under some kind of stress, or we could have eaten something that bothered us, like too much alcohol as an example, stayed up too late, and as a response of being weakened, and for animals that includes loading, transportation, or poor quality diet, what will happen is you get sick. So we split it to 90-10. So if we treat the condition, what happens is that our expectation is to recover, to build that immunity back up and to discharge the disease. What happens is that can happen naturally in some cases, and in other cases needs to be facilitated, or we can maintain it, which means we don't improve and we stay damaged. So the more damage that we have, or the more disease that we introduce, the lower our vitality. Now, the theory of like to cure like is significantly important in this particular case, because what Hahnemann did was looked at things like the malaria. If we could use a homeopathic remedy to diminish the vulnerability to malaria, then we could keep this vitality up, making our immune system more empowered versus being diseased or sick. So what Hahnemann did is he did this with many diseases. Is they made the homeopathic remedies from disease and ultra-diluted substances, and actually did disease prevention 50, 60 years before Pasteur saw it in a microscope in the year 1860, for which he gets all the credit, as if that's the first thought of immunization when they can see bacteria for the first time in a microscope. A very crude microscope, I might tell you, too. So in this particular case, we'd already been doing 60, 70 years of disease prevention with a homeopathic remedy in ultra-diluted substance, without having to actually put huge amounts, we consider, of physical disease material in the body. So the theory of vaccine follows in 1860, where we're actually going to do things like try to prevent smallpox. We're going to try to prevent smallpox by giving people actual smallpox germs. Okay? So what happened when we did that? Is it was deadly. They killed the first groups of people that they gave these immunizations to. The same thing has happened many times during the history, where we've done polio and hurt people, where we've done many different types of immunizations under the pretense or the theory of homeopathy, which is to use a little bit of like to cure like, or to do prevention. The difference is that they're using physical substances, physical disease, where in homeopathy we're using an ultra-diluted natural substance. The difference truly is where it goes. In the case of a homeopathic remedy, it goes to the vital force. In the case of an immunization, it goes to the immune system, or where the organs are actually weak, where the disease is stored, weakening the immune system. So what happens is that we're storing up, we're taking multiple immunizations, which we give, and as a result of it, the vitality is actually diminished. Now what happens is that when the body is diminished is that you now have to, as a result of immunization, what we have to do instead is we have to constantly treat disease. So we do things like for the cattle, or if any of you have dairy cattle, where we're treating for mastitis constantly. So much so that the antibiotics are the supplement to in the feed. They hire in these dairies in commercial operations a veterinarian to actually formulate medication that these animals take on a daily basis under the pretense of doing prevention. And what they're doing is they're actually treating. The animals are not healthier as a result. They just minimize the symptoms while they're chronically ill. Instead of having an acute infection, they have an infection 365 days of the year. So as a result of that, our government has allowed them to have a certain amount of pus or cells of disease in the milk. Hence, the pasteurization is that the milk is considered dirty or full of disease. So the pretense is if we boil it, we're getting now boiled lymph and other signs of disease material in the milk product. But that's considered allowable because this is the kind of management we're doing. It's not that it's clean with a low Semitic count. They actually grade the milk based upon the amount of disease in the product. So grade A, grade AA, or grade B, not for human consumption, is because of the amount of disease in that product. So we have a different idea, which is, let's see if we can do prevention by building this immune system. If we can increase it, then we can decrease the disease, the amount of reoccurrence, the overall vitality, the absence of the need to medicate at all. So these homeopathic remedies have a huge and long track record of doing exactly that. Building the immune system, diminishing the amount of preoccupation that we presume that evidence of things like titers, are positive instead of negative like we see them in homeopathy. We want to diminish the occurrence of disease. So when we use a homeopathic remedy for prevention, we're actually boosting this vitality and not storing disease. So if we have a state of pathology, so let's say that the signs of mastitis are we have a fever, we have a hard bag or painful, we have diminished milk production, so we have many symptoms. So at that particular point, if we use the remedy that actually treats, if we can use that term, to facilitate these symptoms to actually be eradicated by the body, then we don't have to medicate. So I made a formula that's actually mastitis specific. So we can use the remedy to treat the infection, which is really, mastitis is really a form of a staph infection. So if we treat that with the remedy, then the symptoms go away. And now what we can do that's even smarter is we can do prevention. But we've kept this disease from morphing into a new or more chronic disease. So we don't want it to be ever present and treated only when it gets out of hand. So another disease that dairy cattle get is salmonella. So in the case of salmonella, the animals are kept in a limited space, standing in stool that's positive for staph, strep, and salmonella. So instead of them catching it like we would think that we might get a cold acutely or mastitis acutely, they're chronically sick. It just takes a little bit of stress for it to manifest. So what we want to do is exit, which we can do with the remedy, the staph infection or the salmonella from the body, and then the animal is free of it. Now we want to build that immune system so when they're standing in a condition where the disease is present, that they don't get sick again. So we want to build the immunity, diminish reoccurrence, and we can also treat the condition when they have it. So that we don't provoke a more weakened immune system. So the mastitis formula was built exactly for that, addressing the fact that we're going to treat or eliminate the staph infection. Okay? So the evidence is that the first thing that goes away is the fever, the pain, followed by lowers the somatic count. So the evidence is that the remedies are highly effective. So the optimum is to prevent it. So to prevent it, one of the first things in your kits that you receive tonight, there's a set of remedies that are meant to facilitate movement of this immune system. So the first thing that we want to do is do what's called exit that old the old immunizations. When we use that remedy, what it's going to do is get rid of a state that's called vaccinosis, which is chronically ill or full of mucus. So when we diminish those old immunizations, what we want to do is build that vitality. Then we want to do the right thing, which is provide protection. They're in a dirty environment or potentially vulnerable in a lot of cases in these big commercial operations, as well as what might be in your dirt, or worse than that, that the diseases are brought into your pastures as clean as you try to be from the neighbor birds, or your neighbors might have ticks on their sheep. So ticks on my sheep, when I had sheep across the wire fence, my neighbor's sheep were covered with ticks and mine didn't have ticks on them at all. So building the immune system will actually keep them bug resistant. the parasites only get on weak or sickened animals, animals of low vitality, animals that we might consider stressed in some way. So when we increase this immune system, you should be pretty nearly tick-free. Okay? So the evidence is that the animals on that side of the fence can remain ticky while yours are tick-free. So by building this immune system up, the evidence is that not only do we have less reoccurrence, but we have other signs of health. Bright eyes, nice coats, easily shed. If we use homeopathic prevention for parasites, which is the remedy called ProThrive, we can actually stimulate the body to assimilate through the vital force, through the brain, which sends the messages for the body to do its job to perform. So let me give you an example. If somebody was to take a supplement, let's say calcium, for a disease that might be poor bone health, failure to thrive, or even having poor quality of teeth, which might be evident. In humans, we might say osteoporosis. So taking the calcium or even calcium phosphate, which has been used for years and years, produces little or no results. It doesn't build new bone. It's available, the animals eat it, but it doesn't necessarily produce a change in pathology. If we use the homeopathic remedy telling the brain to use or to apply the mineral, then the results are obvious. We get obvious improvement. So we can actually end diseases like osteoporosis by stimulating the body to assimilate, not to eat it physically, to actually facilitate the organism to apply it. So the use of those 13 minerals along with the 2 metals actually doesn't provide what you're doing with your mineral supplementation. It's actually telling the vital force to assimilate it. So it diminishes any toxicity if you overfeed, and what will happen for your animals is they should be eating way less, because they're actually going to use what you're giving them instead of not assimilating it. So you referred to that as tied up, that the mineral was tied up for some reason. So this remedy, let's say that your water is high calcium, low magnesium, might be high sulfur. Whatever that is that created what you call tie up will be liberated with the ProThrive, okay? Because it's balancing. We're not going to take an over-assimilation that could create things like osteoarthritis or stones by overconsumption. It's going to balance it whether it's over or under. Okay? It's a facilitator. Homeopathic remedies facilitate the body to use or identify while not preoccupying it with disease or the side effects of being medicated. Go ahead.
Well, the way I understand it is that whenever possible, the animals will come to balance on their own. And the fact that they're over-consuming is an indication to me that they're not coming to balance. So that's really my concern. I mean, there could be problems with overconsumption, that they get too much of something that they don't need that much of.
Well, if you're putting it out free choice as an example.
Yeah.
So what happens is, let's say that you're using a combination product, and what they're really after is sodium chloride. But because your mineral also has calcium, magnesium, and other things, let's say you put borax in there too, they're going to get it all when they're craving salt. So it's going to create the potential of an imbalance. So what you want to do is balance not only what they need, but also what they might be over or under consuming. So the prothrive is a facilitator of that. Now the other thing that's really interesting is in this experiment when we use these control groups in the pastures, in the multiple pastures, what happened interestingly enough is when the mineral consumption was balanced, it did parasite prevention, including the flies. The flies in the group that was treated versus the one that wasn't, when they were commingled, we put the bulls back in the same pasture, the two bulls that had been separated, along with the many other animals that we treated. And what happened was, and I have a picture of it, the flies were all over the one that didn't get the prothrive, and the one that did get the prothrive, they're nose to nose now, has no flies. They're buzzing over the top, 2-3 feet above his back. Never got on his body. It was fabulous. So the evidence over the years has been the prothrive is one of the key issues that have to do with parasites and worms and prevention for other diseases that are parasitic, like West Nile as an example, or Lyme's disease.
I had a conversation a few years ago with our vet about foot rot, because we had more cases than I was comfortable with, and I asked if there was a vaccine for it, and he said there was, and was it effective? And he said yes, but he preferred that we boosted the cow's immune system so that they wouldn't be affected by that pathogen by getting on a good mineral program, which
yes.
I've been trying to do for years, and it just hadn't found one that was working with our soil and range in our animals. So that's why.
Now I would predict that you'll use less mineral supplementation because by free choice they'll eat less. And the other thing is that you'll see more disease prevention, that you'll see less diseases like foot rot, even though I think that foot rot, interestingly enough, is part of one of the immunization processes. It's not only is it the animals vulnerable from being over-immunized and they're weakened by that immunization process, but also by one of the immunizations literally. So by eliminating those and using the message of foot rot prevention, you should not have any more foot rot.
Well, if ProDrive is to aid in the assimilation of essential minerals, I mean, that's what we're looking for.
And look at the minerals also that appear in your grass. So through that process, they're eating what you might consider to be the best that you can provide from your soil. So when they eat even that grass without the mineral, they're going to assimilate that better too.
Well, it's early days yet to say because I've only been trying it for a short while. But.
So homeopathic remedies different than food supplementation, mineral supplementation, anything that you have to chew and swallow, okay? Same thing with a pharmaceutical or an immunization are physical doses. Homeopathy is not a physical dose. Now, homeopathy politically had struggles with this because they had no tools of the day to justify or validate or be able to see under later when the microscope showed up online that they couldn't see these ultra diluted natural substances. Homeopathy took a lot of criticism for being placebo. The truth is that the tools of the day have caught up. So we can now see homeopathic remedies in an MRI. We can see homeopathic remedies action without any validation from a tool. But the tools, the more sophisticated the tools get, the more obvious how homeopathic remedies work gets validated. So I always like to tell people that homeopathy hasn't diminished due to the lack of results that it produces. It's the lack of understanding that makes it criticized. We've been able to produce results documentably for year after year after year The remedies are more scientific than any pharmaceutical drug available in any category of disease treatment. All the diseases of the world have been made into homeopathic remedies, and most of them have been in use for a long time. And I mean long, not 10 years like a lot of pharmaceuticals that change every 10 years, but I mean hundreds of years. The tuberculosis that we have available as a homeopathic prophylaxis was made in the year 1900. We're still using that to do tuberculosis prevention or to treat things like scours or chronic diarrhea. The vulnerability to it, even in calves, it's preventative, and sheep especially. It's also one of the main remedies to prevent the disease Johne's, which is actually microcystic tuberculosis. So what we've done in medicine, interestingly enough, is change the names of most diseases. So if we look at cholera, that the diarrhea is to the point of dehydration, that's exactly what you're trying to prevent when you're running around trying to stop that infection in your herd. So the use of these original what we call nosodes, or remedies made from diseases in these ultra-diluted substances, are not only preventative, but they're great treatments. But these diseases have been around forever. They've just been morphed into becoming new names. If we look into things like the Merck Manual, we get to see that diseases have multiple names, so that instead of calling it what it might be as staph or strep, we have all the other diseases, including things like ketosis for strep, or they all have been morphed into others, and some even worse from treatment, into these new names. And I wanted to post on the website all the names of diseases that really have other meanings, that are now called by initials even. This TSE, which is transmittable spongiform encephalopathy, mad cow disease, or things that are available in pigs, the PRRS, which is really an AIDS, an autoimmune disease. The reason that we have an epidemic in the animals as well as in the humans of autoimmune disease is this, is we just keep packing in, given more and more diseases, and as a result, the immune system is fried. The immune system is facilitated with the message of disease, but it's overwhelmed and sickened by the way we're using these forms of supposed prevention. So the evidence is that the herd is healthier, longer, and less necessity of treatment. It's blatantly obvious and fabulous that these results are reproducible for all the herds that we've tried them in. The same thing with my practice consists for the previous 5 years of all the clinical use for human immunizations and keeping kids from being sick. They're no longer snotty. They no longer have dark circles under their eyes. They don't have things like the inability to focus. They don't have ADD and ADHD. The higher this immune system is functioning, the less disease is present. The less need to treat. So the evidence is remarkable. Despite the fact that people may not understand how homeopathy works, it might be a headbanger. But the reality is that the remedies are facilitators of the immune system or overall balance. So I'll draw you a different picture and give you an idea of what that looks like. If we have the perception of optimum balance, in optimum balance we have health. We also have a minimum reaction to stress. The world and their animals and people is not absence of stress. It's how we view the stress that makes it damaging. So in this case, that we're going to want to achieve optimum balance, eat good, have good healthy stools, good growth, ability to think in the case of humans and be functional, happy. content in the herd. What happens is that if we create some kind of stress, and if in humans, let's say that's the IRS. So we're going to have worry, and then we don't sleep. Then we have worry, don't sleep, cranky, stomach ache. And then eventually we have an ulcer and potentially a worsening disease, heart disease, or from stress, high blood pressure, and then eventually serious pathology like cancer. So what happens is that the further we get out of balance, the more symptoms manifest. The evidence of movement is to have diminished symptoms and less reoccurrence. So when somebody is over here, they're stressed, depressed, they're on high blood pressure meds, something to go to sleep at night. They're on some, what are they on? Ambien, some amitriptyline. They're on something for the acid reflux. So what happens is that when we eliminate the symptoms, there's no longer a need to be medicated. So what happens is that we can maintain better health. This state is, I'm ready to jump. One more thing go wrong. Over here you say, you know what? I should have made payments, or I'll negotiate. But in this state is healthier than this state's perception. So we want to be in a state of being able to roll with the punches, minimize the ill effects of the conventional vaccines, re-immunize them so they have protection without side effects, then get them on ProThrive, help them assimilate, and then we should have not too many problems. If we can maintain and keep them healthy, you'll have very minimal problems. Now, the method to get these remedies to the animals is, like I said, unique amongst the different types of operations that you have. So we can talk about that. Let's take a break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about that.